This is Dead Space for Windows PC. This is the remake released by Electronic Arts back in 2023. I played the original back on the PS3 and I loved it, and when the PC release was at a good price on Steam, I picked it up. There are a total of 3 games in this series, and I've played and liked them all, but this is the only updated one so far that's been released. This one is actually a little different from the original release, which was 10 or so years back, I guess. But there's so much time between the 2 releases, I didn't really recognize the differences. Are they enough to say that this game was a complete rebuild? I don't think so. I mean, I love this game now, and I loved this game then, so take that into account. But there are certainly differences. In this version, the main character actually speaks. There's a voice actor. He was silent in the original. You also have to unlock portions of the ship by progressing through the story, and in the original it was just a little more accessible. You could go to different areas, although you really always couldn't do everything, I think. Also, you find your different weapons along the way, and in the original I'm pretty sure you had to purchase them from a kiosk. Not a lot of changes, it seems, although I do imagine these graphics were certainly kicked up a little. Dead Space is a survival horror game, and it's set in space where you play the character of Isaac Clarke. The story is set on a ship called the USG Ishimura. It is a large mining vessel. Apparently the crew of the Ishimura found some sort of an artifact on a planet, and they call this artifact the Marker. At the same time, alongside this marker, I guess the ship has become infected with creatures. They're called necromorphs. The necromorphs are organisms that infect dead bodies and mutate these corpses into these terrifying monsters. I guess it feels a little like aliens in that regard, but when they appear, they're in a variety of different lumbering shapes and sizes, and they are always a problem to deal with. They're actually a really great enemy to fight, and they provide plenty of chills along the way. The basic goal, of course, is to survive. Along the way, you're going to have to solve puzzles, prevent the ship from destroying itself, stuff like that. As you go through the plot, some of your immediate missions will change, but the overall goal, of course, is to survive, and then eventually deal with the marker. I think there are a lot of things this game gets right. First, we're playing a great protagonist. You're this engineer with a cool-looking spacesuit, and you collect various tools along the way that you're going to use as weapons. You can upgrade the weapons in your suit along the way, and as a result, you're going to become more formidable as you go forward. Enemies are going to get tougher, of course, but you're always working to try and stay ahead of that curve. I find the weapons in this game to be particularly fun to play, with all their upgradable effects and strengths, and the way that this game plays, you're going to find yourself needing to use all of these items at one point or another. It isn't like a Doom game, everybody wants to use the shotgun. This is going to force you to go through a lot of different items. I think the game also does a great job of keeping things difficult, at least on the first playthrough. I really had to remember the timing of the controls. You don't run particularly fast, and you have to worry about your reload times and how long it's going to take you to switch between your weapons, especially when some creature is bearing down on you. When you go into your submenu and you try to adjust your weapons or maybe use a health pack or upgrade your stasis pack, time doesn't stop on the outside world, so you can be attacked when you're looking at your menu or checking out the map. It's one of a bunch of pressures that they put on you as you play, and it really works. They also like to keep things dark, and the flashlight you have attached to your weapons are not great. I do complain a lot about flashlights in video games. I do this in a lot of my videos. Mostly because flashlights that I see on the internet, or even have at home, they can practically light up a field. So when I see a really narrow cone of light shining down a hallway, I get a little irritated. But darkness is important here, it's a horror game. Still, if it were a little brighter and that cone was a little wider, it would still be scary. The maps are relatively large, but it's not an open world experience, it's much more linear. So, as a result, there's going to be a lot of backtracking through areas you've already walked through. Although, there certainly could be creatures now lurking in places that you thought you already cleared. I think one of the bigger aspects of the game, at least to me, it seems to be about you learning to manage your resources properly. You will not have enough ammunition to shoot at everything. You will never have enough ammunition. So you need to learn to utilize exactly what you do have. In addition to your weapons, you do have a stasis tool. Basically, you charge a meter, you can see it on your back, and you can use this to freeze a creature in place for a period of time. When they're frozen, they are certainly easier to deal with or run away from, until they thaw out again, of course. Stasis power is something that needs to be recharged at a station, or you have to buy a unit to recharge it. It's not very abundant, but it can be very valuable. There's also a kinesis tool in your suit. This lets you magnetically pick up and move certain types of items around. It's kind of like having telekinesis, and it's useful for pulling supplies from places that you can't physically reach, or you don't want to walk to because you're afraid of alerting something. You can also use this to pick up and throw different sort of objects along the way, using them kind of as weapons. There are these types of cylinders. First, there are these glowing red cylinders you can pick up. They glow in place. They're great because you can throw them, and they explode when they hit with something. It's kind of like having a free grenade. There's also a blue cylinder, and when you throw that one, it explodes. It freezes an area in place for a while. Both of these can be very useful, and they can help you destroy creatures without you having to waste ammunition. Ammunition that you really can't afford. We also have store terminals where you can use credits to replenish your supplies. You can usually buy ammunition, health packs, stasis recharge, and upgrades. You don't have unlimited funds to do this, of course, and honestly, especially early in the game, I do my best to not buy anything from the stores if I can at all avoid it, with the exception of nodes. I try to save all my money, and I even try to sell extra stuff just to get nodes. They're one component in this game that I really appreciate. You buy them, and you can also find them along the way, and when you have them and you find a workbench, this is where you can upgrade your suit or weapons. This is how you change your health, your stasis time, your damage, your reload speed, and the cartridge size of your ammunition. The nodes probably have the biggest value in the game, especially compared to buying a health pack, which you don't want to buy, but sometimes you really need that health pack, of course. It really hurts to spend money on a health pack. Dead Space is also not a quick experience. You need to sometimes be pretty slow, you need to be focused, and you gotta calculate your way through certain areas. Having to go through cautiously in such dire circumstances, it kind of adds to the dread of the experience. You're trying to escape and survive an ordeal, and there is sort of at least the appearance of a timetable. But it's deadly around every corner, so it's a sort of contrast between wanting to run everywhere and just wanting to be careful enough to not die. Also, the experience kind of changes a little along the way. First, you're fighting human-like creatures, and eventually they kind of morph into larger and worse things. If you've not played this before, this game has a lot of surprises along the way, in terms of random creatures and different tasks that you have to perform to survive. I found myself in parts of the game where I felt competent enough to get through, but then suddenly I had to navigate a scene in zero gravity and figure out how to use an external cannon on the side of the ship to blast a monster away. That was not my finest hour. It took me a while to figure it out. But they keep things moving, which is great. Dead Space is a creepy, claustrophobic survival game with some awesome visuals and weapons that you don't find in other games. I think in all good survival horror games, it is definitely a chore to get through. But as you upgrade and you defeat more enemies along the way, it starts to feel a lot more satisfying than I would have expected. To manage to get through an onslaught of creatures in a really crowded room where you barely have enough ammunition, that's a rush when you succeed. After you beat the game, it does give you some pretty decent unlocks. You can play a new plus game, and you can also unlock an additional difficulty. I believe it's a 1-kill difficulty, but I'm definitely not trying that. But when you beat the game, you get to keep the majority of your weapons and upgrades from the first playthrough. I just think you might have to unlock stasis and kinesis again, but being able to start the game with maxed out weapons and maxed out abilities is really, really nice. Well, that's all I have today for Dead Space, the remake for Windows PC. Thank you for stopping by for a quick look, and I hope to catch you on another video.